I am delighted that this stream finds David Irving still alive. There was some confusion in the last few days, about whether David Irving was still alive, and I believe some fake news on Twitter that he was not. So I was very relieved that I hadn't gone live on this stream, and also, so I didn't, feel I had to get on the bandwagon of, talking about all the condolence. The predictable condolences and a look back on this life, because there is no need for this at the moment, I'm pleased to announce. But I did want to talk about David Irving because I think it is shocking that historians are treated so badly in the West. I suppose he won't be the first historian to be treated badly. I know there was a discussion in Rome, in Roman times, about how history should be presented. There was Livy was a Roman historian, and I think there was some discussion about how history should be presented to Romans. Let me see if I can find something on the subject, because Rome does have a long history, and I'm sure there will be schools of thought saying we should present Roman history in the best possible light, and then there will be others who say we need to let people know what's and what our history is. And in view of my my recent conclusions about the failure of Christianity, I think the problem is that people don't understand their own history, and probably Romans didn't really understand their history even after the decline and fall of Rome. And for many centuries, I'm sure a lot of people didn't really get what happened to Rome. And it's only now that we can have this perspective on the history of Rome to really understand it. And so new history books need to be written. I'm not a trained historian. I don't particularly want to write a long history book. Just a bit of an essay would do me nicely. So my view of Western history is to do with the history of Christianity, which is also inextricably tied up with the Roman Emperor, the Roman Empire. And this means we have to work out what made Rome successful, and and how Rome went against its own principles, because we know that the Romans, or the success of the Roman Republic, started off as people who knew themselves as people who hated kings, and therefore had a republic, to becoming a empire with their first emperor, who was Octavian, also known as Augustus, and really he was a king who was, and we also know that Roman The Romans worshipped, or were supposed to worship, their emperors after they are dead. And we also know that, I think it was Caligula, wasn't it? It was Caligula who made his senators worship him while he was still alive, and made them worship his horse, or made them make his horse into a senator, or something silly like that. What has this to do with history? I suppose I am saying people don't really understand their history. Are they willfully blind? Yes, probably. Or, okay, they might not be willfully blind, but they stop certain people from asking questions and making mistakes. I mean, as far as David Irving was concerned, well, why shouldn't he say what he thought about World War II? But the thing is, because it was so fresh, and because the consequences of World War II are still being played out um, in contemporary politics, the consequences are, well, too painful to bear. And also, if it were ever admitted that Britain should not have declared war on Germany in World War One and World War Two, then all kinds of things fall to be considered, such as the competence of the ruling classes and the fitness for purpose of the political system that we are now saddled with, i.e., representative democracy. So I guess we need to be a little bit more understanding. If people don't quite understand their history, especially if it relates to, well, touchy subjects such as religion and political systems. So I'm saying it's all wrong. Christianity is kaput, and even the liberalism that came up to replace Christianity is wrong, and there have already been attempts to replace liberalism with nationalism and socialism, and it has all failed, and now it's time to try secular Quranism. And so this pertains to history and historians, and I'm saying historians should be treated well so that they do not fear to tell the truth, and therefore the government will have the benefit of their historical investigation, so that people do not fall into the tragic errors that cause them such great suffering, such as revolutions and invasions and wars. So I hope that the West will eventually regain its ability to speak the truth and exercise logic within a set of moral principles that have been shown to be operational and necessary for an advanced civilization. So, with regard to what I said about the macro and micro history departments, what do I mean by that? I mean that macro history is, well, of time and tides of, historical movements and cultural shifts, while microhistory is more to do with the minutiae of treaties and letters and legislation and that sort of thing. So I'm really more of a macro history sort of person, analysing history in terms of the longevity of ideologies, secular political ideologies, and religions. So I see that Dr. Mengele has popped up. But he hasn't said anything interesting. I also said that the macro history department should be run by Jews and Muslims because they are the ones capable of seeing history with the long perspective that is needed to analyze events. And possibly the Chinese have been told that they govern in centuries. They plan ahead and think of, well, the future of China, hundreds of years ahead, while short-termist Westerners cannot see beyond the next election. And that is why democracy has got to go. I don't know if I've made myself properly clear about it, but I'll try to sum up what I'm saying. I'm saying that even after all this time, it is not really quite clear why Rome fell. I am saying that it was meant to fall, but then all empires do fall. But the reasons for their fall, are they even different? I'm saying all empires become a victim of their own success. And the first thing that they do when they become really successful is that they break their own rules about maintaining minimum standards of sexual morality. And when that goes, it's a slippery slope to the bottom and extinction. And I think it has more or less happened to all empires that you can think of. I'm a bit vague about Chinese history, but I'm sure there have been times when women were powerful and then less powerful, and I was going to talk about the golden age of any country, but this is also a subjective view, isn't it? I mean, it's possible that future generations might talk about us being in our golden age, but I mean, to what extent do people? I mean, we'll never be able to tell if the people of the time that you said was the golden age of Britain or America or whatever would actually say, "Oh yes, yes, we were having a fine old time." You might find them saying, "No, we had a terrible time. We think you people now are having a better time." So we don't really know. I suppose you can say that any empire when it reached its zenith would be feeling particularly proud of itself, and I suppose that is usually pinpointed at a time when the empire is at its widest possible extent, and then before it starts to decline. But maybe we won't even know after all that's been said and done. I guess all we can do is allow historians to properly investigate the primary sources and allow them to say what they say without penalising them. Unfortunately, there are disturbing signs of even calling A.J.B. Taylor a revisionist, implying he's some sort of Holocaust denier. And he was one of my set books when I was doing A-level history. So there are these disturbing signs and of increasing censorship and paranoia. But I think it would make sense to think in terms of macro and micro history. So micro history would be, the minutiae of concentration camps and, memos passing between the Nazis, that sort of thing. While macro history well, an example would be, calling World War One and World War Two the second 30 Years' War, or saying that World War One and World War Two was the equivalent of the modern equivalent of the Peloponnesian War, and America is the new Rome. It's when you make these analogies that you are showing that you do understand history and are able to apply certain principles because you do see certain patterns and you you recognize it when you show that you have learned the lesson of history and are able to apply it to a new set of events. So, in terms of David Irving, I have a few of his books, but I regret to say I haven't read it all. I know he writes really well, and it is entirely my fault that I didn't even finish reading his short book. And I know people have said he writes, he writes his historical, he writes his history as if it were a novel, and that was what made him so irresistible as a historian because he knows how to tell a good story well. But the point is, it's not just about um, well, yes, I mean the idea of being able to examine primary documents in a workmanlike way and record conclusions and you know is of course important. But then I guess the proper historian would have to um, form new conclusions. I suppose that's what I'm trying to say. To form new conclusions about things, events that have not been formed before, and I think I have done the job really. I'm not going to be writing, any history book about all this. I leave it to others, but I think it's important to understand that Christianity is kaput, and it's so kaput that its replacement of liberalism is also kaput, and even the attempts to replace liberalism are also kaput. And that's why, looking back at history, we are able to conclude that the next step forward, the only rational and moral choice, would be secular Quranism. Thank you for your